excited to introduce our next speaker. Todd Saliman was named president of the University of Colorado in June of 2021. And before taking on this role, Todd was CU's Senior Vice President for Strategy, Government Relations, and Chief Financial Officer. He has 30 years of experience working in higher education and public policy in Colorado, serving in the cabinet for 2 former governors and as a state legislator. Please join me in welcoming CU President Todd Saliman.
Very much.
And I have the cost calculator on the webpage already pulled up.
Okay.
So when we get there, we can just come up and help you get.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you to Christian. And so you've been sitting for a little while, and I'm going to show you more slides. So that isn't always a good combo. Are we good? If you need to get up and grab some coffee, so you don't doze off while I'm talking, that'd be great. But please feel free to get up and do what you need to do. So thank you all very much for inviting me here today. I really appreciate it, and it's such a pleasure to be with all of you. And we are members of all of all these organizations, and so we are committed to working with you to getting what you need to be stewards in your community. So thank you, and thanks to Sarah and Micah. Where you go? Okay, and to Kathy and to Christian. So thank you all very, very much for being good partners with us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about affordability for higher education in general. I'll give you a few CU specific factoids because, you know, I can't resist. And then at the end, we have this really handy tool that we built that helps people estimate how much it would cost to get a degree from CU. And we built that tool because you can see the title of this presentation is Affordability and Accessibility. And what I found along the way is me telling you what's affordable to you is kind of patronizing. And I don't really know what's affordable to you, and we all look at that differently. Even if we have similar economic circumstances, you know, our values are different, and we might see it differently. And so we built this tool to really try to make it into instead of a macro conversation, into a very much of a personal conversation, so that each person can figure it out for themselves. And so we'll talk about that a little bit along the way too. So I am going to use the arrows. All right. So thank you all very much. We are a member, and we're actually a member of the Denver Metro Chamber too. So it's so nice to be here. I'm sure you love having JJ down the hall, and he's an incredible partner for the statewide work. So just a little bit of information about higher ed in general, and as you heard, so my prior life, I was a CFO, so I love talking about this stuff. But I love talking about the financials, not because I like, you know, math, even though it does come in handy. It's because how you spend your money is where your priorities lie. And so that's really how I've always looked at this stuff. I also used to be in the governor's office and was in charge of the state budget. And when I was in the legislature, I was on the JBC. So I give you that so that feel free to ask me questions in that world too, because I've had a little bit of experience there also. So first punchline. So higher ed, getting a college degree is absolutely worth it. So when somebody goes to college, on average, when they have a bachelor's degree, they'll earn about $1.5 million more through their lifetime than someone who doesn't have a college degree. If I have other slides that I'm not going to show you, but the unemployment rate for college graduates, especially during the pandemic, was much lower than for people who did not have a college degree. And so not only is it a path toward making more money in one's lifetime, it's also a path toward better sustainability and better predictability when it comes to employment. Now, that doesn't apply to everyone, and we know that, you know, that we probably know people who did really well without a college degree, and we know people with college degrees who aren't doing well. And so it's not a universal truth, but it's, generally it is true though, that people who go to college do better in terms of their financial future in life. And so when we look at that, so it's actually, how much does somebody make after they graduate from college, even from CU? It's hard for us to answer that question, which has been maddening for me over the last 10, 15 years, that it's hard to get this information. But we've developed, as we've spent more and more time on it, you've worked with Census Bureau information, and we've developed better resources here. And so what this shows you is the average income over a 10-year period from the year you graduate to 10 years out, what the average income is for someone from any of our campuses, what they'll earn in any of these, through any of these programs. So on average, someone with an engineering degree over that 10-year period will earn about $94,000 a year. I believe that's what that says. I don't have my reading glasses on. And then what that gold bar shows is what the average debt load would be upon graduation for somebody with that degree if they have debt. About half of our students don't have any debt. For those who do have debt, the folks with the engineering degrees on average would have about $30,000 debt. And then that little blue bar is how much they have to pay off their student loans each year. And they would pay that for 10 years on average. And so what this shows is, obviously, you want the gray bar to be a whole lot bigger than that blue bar. And it is. And what this shows is that our degrees, we believe this is an indication that it's worth it. That not only will you make more, but even if you have debt, you're able to pay that off. Now, is $30,000 of debt too much? It is. That's not good. I think it's less than a lot of people think it would be, but it's still too much, and we think it's too much. And part of the reason for that is because state funding for higher education has been declining over time, even though on a per student basis. And I'll show you some more information on that too. Any questions about this slide? And the reason so I think one of the really surprising things on here is that the top bar is social sciences. And the reason for that is because there are a lot of economists in there. There are people who go to law school. And what we have found is that right out of the gate, that professional degree like engineering, business degree, like you do better with that right out of the gate. But over time, and if I went 15 or 20 years out, over time, the folks with those social sciences degrees end up being the president of the University of Colorado. And so I have a degree in political science, and so you never know where you're going to end up. But over time, those folks do earn more on average. So when you look at how you spend your money, what this attempts to show is how somebody spends their money over time, right out of college, if you're under 25, and when you get into that 25 to 35-year-old zone, which I still consider being young. But so when you look at this, you can see that right out of the gate, when you're under 25, you'll be paying about 7.5% of your income on paying on your student loan, if you have a student loan. As you get older and you start to make more money, of course, it becomes a smaller portion of your total income. And so when you're in that 25 to 34-year-old range, it's about 4%. So these are questions to answer. Is it worth it? And so we of course think it is. It doesn't really speak to the affordability issue. And so I'll get to that in a bit. So the most important thing, if people sometimes ask me, if you could do one thing, what would it be? If I could do one thing, it would be to improve graduation rates at all of our higher education institutions in the state. Those last slides that I showed, that's the story for CU. Every institution has a similar story for their graduates. The problem for all of us is that we're not doing a great job when it comes to graduating our students. And you can see the 6-year graduation rates at all the institutions in Colorado. Now, I have these arranged in a way where you will naturally compare us to each other throughout the state. That's not a fair way to compare us. A better way is to compare us to our peers around the country. But no matter how you slice it, our institutions in the state are not doing a great job when it comes to graduating our students. And I'll often say our job is to do our job. When you come in the door, our job is to get you across the finish line. And if we don't do that, then we are failing that student. And these are the 6-year graduation rates. An institution where students come and they might be working, this is probably a reasonable graduation rate for them because they're working and they're not a full-time student. But when you look at 4-year graduation rates, this is the expectation at CU. This is the expectation at CSU and at Mines, and for a lot of the students at these other institutions. The people in these bars are the people who come in as full-time students who have an expectation. Oh, and our regent is here. Regent Heidi Ganal just walked in. Hello. She's my boss, so so be nice to her. So and say good things about me to her. But this includes the students who come in anticipating that they'll get out in 4 years. So at CU, where we're doing at CU Boulder, we are getting less than half of our students out in 4 years. And you can see at our other campuses and how we compare to the other institutions in the state. So this is a huge issue that I think is a problem for all of our institutions in Colorado, because when we talk about affordability, the most important thing to make college affordability is to get out in time. Because if you tack on another year, you just increase the cost by 25%. And so this is the key, is to doing better here. Nearly every institution in Colorado does worse than their peers nationally when it comes to graduation rates. And I think one of the big reasons for that is because we're 48th or 47th in the nation when it comes to funding for higher education. And so we don't have as much support to give to our students, financial aid, wraparound services, things like that. And this is going to become harder over time because more and more of the students coming into higher education in Colorado have more and more need. And so they're going to need more and more services. So I think keeping our graduation rates even here is going to be a challenge, let alone improving that. But if there's one thing I could fix, it would be that. So here's our funding story in Colorado. So this is this awesome chart, and I love awesome charts, but this one takes a minute to consume. So what this shows is funding change adjusted for inflation on a per student basis when it comes to state funding per resident student. And it looks at the change from the year 2000 to the year 2019, fiscal year 2001 through fiscal year 2020. So what you could see here is that CU, and we're over here on the left side of that chart, that the amount of funding on a per student basis that we've gotten from the state of Colorado has gone down by nearly 50% since the year 2000. And you can see, so Mines beat us in this race, and this is not a race you want to win. So Mines beat us, but we're second. And you can see that statewide average is a reduction of 27%. So people, or 27, almost 28%. So people will sometimes ask me, is higher ed going to be privatized in Colorado? What's it going to feel like if higher ed becomes private? First of all, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the state will ever eliminate funding for higher education. But when it comes to state funding, we're 50% less than we were 20 years ago. And so it's like, when your problems don't start when you're falling, your problems don't start when you hit the ground. Your problems start when you fall off the cliff. And so we're about halfway down. And and I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom, but this is a challenge in Colorado. And the legislature and governor have been working hard to increase funding for higher ed, But when you look at it on a per student basis, we've lost ground. So one of the other things we hear a lot about, and that I think is a big concern for all of us, is that higher education isn't serving our high school graduates in an equitable way. And so when you look at the people who are graduating from high school, and you look at if if they're underrepresented minority groups or two or more races, things like that, and you look at CU and you look at the percentages coming out of high school and you look at who we're serving, we clearly have work to do. Now, CU Denver is serving a disproportionately large number of people from underrepresented groups. Our other campuses aren't. And this is just for students. When you look at faculty and staff, we have the exact same problem. So we do not reflect the face or opinions of Colorado. And it's something that we need to do better at CU and at every institution in Colorado. So this is a huge challenge for us. And we need to do better because these are our future students. And so if we don't serve the changing students coming out of high schools in Colorado, then we're not serving Colorado and we're not going to be able to meet your workforce needs into the future. But there's more. So the other kind of compounding challenge here is that the number of high school graduates is declining in our great state. Now, some people call it a cliff, and I think that's kind of melodramatic. It's not a cliff, but it's going down, and that makes it hard. And it also makes it hard on K through 12 because we all know that our schools are funded on a per student basis. When funding goes down, they get less money. And so this is going to be a big problem for school districts all over the state. I'm sure many of you come from communities with school districts with declining enrollment already, and it's just going to probably get worse. For us, those are our customers, and when you look at this forecast that the number of high school graduates is expected to decline over time, that makes it challenging for us because that's our bread and butter too, and so we need to do more to serve the people who are graduating. So about 40% of graduates from Colorado high schools don't go on to get any post-secondary education. So that's a failure, but that's also an opportunity. So we need to do more to serve that population. But this is going to become an increasing challenge over time. And it's a problem amongst the institutions. We compete with each other, we all we're working hard on getting along, and we do all get along pretty well, but we compete with each other. And in Colorado, while our line goes down, our line doesn't go down nearly as much as many other states. And so we have a lot of states from around the country who have recruiters in Colorado trying to poach our students and get them to go to their institutions. And we have a hard time keeping them because we don't have as much financial aid to offer them to keep them here. And so they don't feel the love, and then they leave. And so it becomes like this spiraling compounding challenge that we all have to face in higher education. So any questions about that? I know there's lots of talk about this issue.
Do we have any indication as to why that number is going down as far as graduates?
Because the population, because people aren't having as many children, and the people moving here aren't having as many children, or they're moving here and they're not having any children at all. And so it's just, it's because of us. Oh, look, hi.
I was wondering, so a lot of your numbers look like they're 2019, 2020. I would assume that with COVID, that has exacerbated the problem. Have any data on that yet?
So we do. So did this get worse because of COVID? And the answer is absolutely it did. A little sliver of good news is that freshman enrollment at all of our campuses actually went up this year, but it went down a lot. The bad news, and that's not the case for every institution in the state, the bad news is that enrollment for first generation students has gone down throughout the state. in terms of new first-gen students. So we're really worried. I think we're all worried that about why that is, and if we're going to get them back. And so that's a major concern, because those early slides show how higher education, a college degree is a ladder in life, and it gives you, it's a ladder to opportunity. And those first generation students are the ones who need that opportunity the most. And so we're worried about them not starting their ascent.
Mr. President, I like the charts too.
Oh, thank you.
Going back to one of the ones that you showed with the declining numbers over the last 2 decades of first state funding. One of the things that I'd like to ask you about that is, what is the percentage of state funding total to your CU system budget? Is it only about 5% of the funding? And if that's the case, then there's a whole lot of other factors going into this state funding that is driving costs that makes it unaffordable for our resident students here in Colorado.
So of course you know about this, because you've been around the block a couple of times too. So thank you for that question. And thank you for remembering our factoids that we shared with you along the way. So that's right. So about 5% of our total budget comes from the state of Colorado. And I look at our budget, and I'll talk about this from CU's perspective. This is the way it is to varying degrees for all the institutions in Colorado. About a third of our budget is from restricted funds, and that's research funding, and that is designated for specific purpose. We can't use it for anything else, and if we do, we get into a lot of trouble. So that's kind of over there. Another third is auxiliaries, and auxiliaries are things that operate like businesses. So the bookstore, housing and dining, athletics, those are all auxiliaries. And they operate like a business. If they get less money, they have less staff. And if they get more money, it's because they have more customers and they hire people. And so they operate on their own. So the other third of that budget is operating. And the sources of funding for that are tuition and state funding. And state funding is because it's only that third of that slice, it's a larger portion of that piece of the pie. And so, that's what, when most people think about higher education, they think about faculty and learning and that's in that slice. And so, and our options are very limited in that slice. We either have the state paying for it, or we have students paying for it. We have donors, but donors designate their funds for very specific purposes, and generally it's not to pay for utilities, It's for something that inspires them. And so those funds are generally off limits too. Some of them are for scholarships, which is great. And so our options are limited when it comes to that piece of the pie. And we are committed to trying to identify new revenues, new funding sources. But the reality is, flexible money is the best kind. We all know that, and the only real sources for that in higher education are state funding and tuition. And so we do. You're right. It is more complicated, but it's also it's not particularly complicated, and that's how we pay the bills. When the state pays less, students pay more, and we bust our butts. To keep costs in check. Bruce Benson, that was his thing, and I worked for him for a long time. I promise you, that was his thing. And I was on the JBC when we had to, and in the governor's office when we had to cut deeply. I mean, I know how to balance a budget, and I am happy to make hard choices, but it's just, we don't have as much.
You see that the high school graduation rates. Sure. you see the high school graduation rates continually drop.
Mhm.
You also see the number of graduates at higher level drop. So does the projection of the faculty support teaching in these higher education, do you see that as a problem in the near future?
The percentage of faculty,
Faculty available
oh,
to be able to fill the jobs in
yeah.
higher ed all the way around. Do you see that as a problem coming up?
No, I don't think the availability, I think the availability of line staff is an issue, people to work in the dorms and in our dining halls. That's a problem, just like it probably is for all of you. We're competing with you all when it comes to hiring folks on the front line. But in terms of the availability of faculty, I don't, our problem isn't that there aren't enough faculty out there, it's that we pay less than our peers around the country, and so sometimes they don't choose us.
So, thank you for being here. I'm Merritt Linky, Grand County Commissioner, also chair. And I know that you conversation a little bit. You talked about the customers, high school graduates, but I wonder if we shouldn't be doing a little more outreach to the junior college system in Colorado.
Yep.
And for example, NJC, I'm a graduate of NJC, and depending on who you ask, I turned out.
Is the jury still out, or?
No, seriously. But I didn't go to a Colorado school after 2 years I spent there. I went to Wyoming.
Yeah.
So the reason I think that might be an advantage for y'all is that they spent those 2 years there rather than being 2 years with thousands and thousands of kids on a huge campus at CU, and they get lost in the shuffle. So if they got those 2 years under their belt, and it's more affordable, get those 2 years out of the way, then I think maybe you can state that you could improve that graduation rate, which should translate not just as graduation rate, but also to become a productive.
Yep. Yes.
And the other thing, now you confuse me. So that's what I'm trying to get at, is that maybe we should do a little more outreach with the junior college system or the community college system in Colorado. And those incoming juniors that just finished their sophomore year might have a better chance of adding to that graduation rate and thus becoming more proficient members of society, which that's what we're ultimately shooting for. So again, a plug for competition a little bit, but it might end up being a solution for the big picture problem that we're talking about. Thank you.
So thank you. So I totally agree with that. And I'm happy for you to plug our competition, because our competition is also our pipeline. And those are our friends. And so we've actually been traveling around the state. We were in Sterling and Fort Morgan this summer, and Pueblo and Durango and Ignacio, Southern Utes. And so we're traveling around the state to have exactly this conversation. This ability, concurrent enrollment, being able to transfer AP credits, these students who come with those credits, they do better, and they save money. So it kind of tees up this. I want to show you this calculator thing, because we are 110% on board with what you just said. And our campuses are working really hard to form partnerships with community colleges and other institutions around the state to do that kind of 2+2 approach and develop and support exactly what you're saying. So I'm going to skip ahead to this cool thing. Okay. So this actually lets you see how what you're talking about can make college cheaper at CU. So since you were talking, so maybe you can help me fill this out. So what this does is we get to plug in, and this is on our website, so any of you can do it, but you get to plug in some different assumptions, and it tells you how much it'll cost to get a degree from CU. So So first we have to choose a campus. So which campus should we choose? Boulder? Okay. Okay. No, you choose. You choose. Okay. All right. Okay. I'll do Boulder. Okay. Okay. Then we choose a student type. Is it a traditional student or a working adult? If it's at Boulder, it's most likely traditional, probably not somebody who's working. But I'll show you how it can look different at the various campuses. So then we choose the household income. So what household income do you want to choose?
Very poor.
Very poor. Okay. Years to degree. So let's assume for a second that they're on the 4-year plan, and then I'll show you what transfer credits do. Okay. You want to talk? Do you want to assume 4-year plan?
Took me a lot more than 4, but let's not.
Okay. Well, we'll be optimistic on this one. And then it starts to calculate, and then it shows the annual cost. So this person, and we assume that they'll work part-time. So the estimated out-of-pocket costs for this person are about $10,000 a year, $9,000 a year. So then we can go in here and we can start playing around a little bit. So let's say that is a person who has some transfer credits to bring with them. So how many should we give them?
1 year.
1 year. Okay, 1 year. So the price just went down. Then let's look at some other things. Is that person going to have any loans? So we assume no loans. Do you want to give that person a loan?
A small loan.
So 10,000. So 10,000 over their entire period. Okay. Okay, so the price just went to $479 a month while they're in college. And after they graduate, they're going to have a $100 loan payment, $106 every month for 10 years. So we can also look at their living expenses. Do they live on campus or do they live at home?
On campus.
Okay. Are they going to, so we assume $1,800 a year for books. You can rent books, you can save money on books. Do you want to assume the full cost though, or do you want to assume a little bit less?
We're going to send the books.
Okay. So let's say that we'll only assume 75% of that. And then personal expenses, we assume $3,000 a year in personal expenses. That's for, Anyway, that's for stuff. Are they going to spend less or they're
A little more.
A little more? I don't have an option for that. That's not an option. Okay. Well, I can't say more. So let's just take their books back up to 100%. That'll compensate for it. Okay. So this shows you. And so then what I would ask is, so the cost of getting that 4-year degree for that person is the out-of-pocket cost is $17,000, and they'll leave with $10,000 in debt. So then I would ask that person, is that affordable? And if they say yes, then my answer is, then college is affordable for you. But different people will have different answers. And what's really fun with this little tool is that you can go up here and you can look at how that changes. So if we go and look at that student and we put them in kind of that middle income range, upper middle income range, then that's the price for them because they get less aid. We can look at what that, if that is a student who's going to school at UCCS, the price actually goes up. And that's because UCCS has less financial aid available. If we look at that person and say, but that's a working adult and they work at home, or they live at home, so they don't live on campus, so we don't include housing because they're going to pay for housing anyway, then the cost goes down. And so this is a tool that we built for each of you to figure out if you think college is affordable based upon these various characteristics. And it shows somebody the power of transfer credits. So someone said associate's degree. So if we go and we give that person a full-on, oh, not that one, associate's degree, and they they fully transferred their 60 credits, that's how you make college cheaper. It's exactly how you said, and that's to bring credits to the party. So that's how I've been looking at affordability, trying to not preach to you what's affordable to you, but instead to try to develop tools so you can figure that out for yourself. Mm-hmm.
And we unfortunately are out of time for additional questions, but Tony, I think you're going to be here throughout the day today. So if you do have questions, please go see Tony. For those on this side of the room, Tony said that Todd brought swag.
I did. So we need you to help advertise.
It's good to see you here.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Let's thank President Saliman for joining us this morning.